What's going on, YouTube? Got a different one here for you today. This has been kind of an ongoing project for me. Picked this thing up for super cheap. 2000 Ford Focus ZX3. Dogs are out having fun playing today. Kind of. Say hi. Anyways, we're doing a wide body kit on this one today. I already got the one fender done. I want to show you guys kind of what you're looking at for an end result. This is great if any of you guys are in like a welding class. Don't necessarily do this to your 2022 WRX, or do, whichever. You only live once. I mean, just don't do it to your mamas. Anyways, but all we had to do was cut the fender. There was a seam right here, and I'll show you on the driver's side. That's the one we're going to be working on today. This is probably going to be a 3 or 4 part series. I'll kind of show you as we go along what we're looking at. So first and foremost, you want to unbolt the front bumper, get it out of your way so you don't accidentally cut it up. On this one, I actually have to pull a headlight, and you will end up, by the time you're done, pulling that fender off to weld it up. You can also do it without pulling the fender all the way off, but you're going to be welding from this side, welding down in, which you'll see from some of my welds where I burnt all the way through. Now I get to take a die grinder in there and try and grind all of that flat, but for an overall pretty decent look, I mean, I'm happy with it. I mean, for absolutely nothing other than a little bit of argon and welding wire, I mean, this cost was next to nothing. So from the back side, you can see this actually looks pretty stinking good, but this is all factory here. So the fender actually swooped in, and a lot of these fenders actually do this and make this possible to do. Now on the bottom of the fender, all I've got is just a little spacer back behind here where the fender bolts to the pinch weld on this car. And I've just kind of spaced him out a little bit. He's not the straightest, he's obviously kinked, but then if you look down my rocker panel, you'll notice it. Yep, tried to PDR it, tried to pull it out with a slide hammer. Didn't really go all that great, but then again, I'm not a body guy. I'm a mechanic. This is what I work on. Putting a transmission in a 16 Caravan tomorrow, or Monday actually. That's Monday's job. About $2,000 for that trans, another $800 in labor. So it'll be a good Monday. But what we're working on today. So all we ended up doing was taking a die grinder and very carefully cutting right down in the middle of the groove. Cut right down through it. And then before I do that, we want to make a template for this piece. And this I actually cut out of the old door that was on this. This one actually did have a green door on it, but if you can see from all the rippled paint down there towards the end, right there on the quarter panel, this whole side was caved in. This door wouldn't open, driver's door wouldn't open, neither window worked. This thing actually sat for I think a year, exposed to the elements, luckily in covered parking, but still open to the environment. Fortunately, no cats, no mice, even though there was about a pound of McDonald's fries in the back and scattered all over the car. This thing was actually pretty gross when I got it, but for a $400 project, she's been pretty decent. But back to these wide bodies. So before we make that cut here, and we're going to want to make as clean cut as possible because we're going to be rejoining these two pieces of the fender. This is what's going to make this the absolute best for you, and I might also recommend you might try it on a junkyard fender if you're planning on painting the car, which this one needs paint, but it needs a ton of body work before it could ever get to that point where I'm actually painting stuff. This one was actually rattle canned black when I got it, and I ended up stripping all of that, wet sanding all of it, and bringing it back with some, you might notice those tan bottles if you've ever played with those before, but 3 different compounds to actually bring that paint shine back. But here I am now on my freshly polished and wet sanded fender cutting the, yeah, I cut it, okay. But we want to make that template first. Cardboard is your best friend for this. I'm sure you guys have seen this 1,000 times. But we're just using a piece of, if I can hold on to it, cardboard here. We're just going to line it up with where we want it. We're going to trim it down, get our overall length, but before we do that, we need to make sure that it's going to fit. So if you notice, there's a gap there towards the end. There's a gap up here, there's a gap up here, and none of those lines are straight at all. I think I was going to use that side. Anyways, we're going to come over here to the driver's side so you can see what we started with. You can see there's just a factory kind of body line, and it runs all the way through the door, and we're just going to cut right through that. So just mark it out, and then cut right along him. And then when you get to the inside of that fender where it rolls in and folds in, you're going to cut straight horizontal in like this. Perfectly flat and straight. It's going to give you the cleanest look when it's done. So what we're going to do, I'll show you this side's actually has way more contour because that passenger fender was actually pretty messed up. But you're going to want to break the cardboard, meaning you're going to want to bend it. I like to roll it up like on a jack handle. Roll it up on there both directions, stomp on it, drive over it a couple of times, kind of smash it out, and that'll make it a lot more pliable, a lot more easier to use, and a lot more easier to flex. Now, I'm not going to be able to cut this out on camera, but I can kind of show you what you're looking at. So we're going to have contours, right? Sorry. We're going to have contours that aren't going to match up. So if we were to cut so on this one we're doing about a 2-inch flare out in order to cover up my wide tires that I bought for this thing, and they're a little too wide for the rims that I have for it. But we are going to cut about 2 inches, and we want to leave it wide like this first because we're going to be making some pretty crazy cuts. If you look down there towards the end, you'll see there's a pretty considerable gap down there. We're tight up here. And then down here towards the bottom, we've got almost an inch gap. So we can't just cut it straight. We've got to kind of contour it in. There are some tools that you can use that will help. Let me grab mine. I think this thing was like 10 or 15 bucks or something at Harbor Freight. But basically you can push it up against crazy contours, and it will give you that contour. Right now, on a longer body panel piece like this is not necessarily ideal, but it can be done, where we start at the very, very bottom, and I messed it up trying to do this one-handed, and we can kind of start getting our contour of what this is going to look like. But you'll notice that this is, obviously I could have done that a lot better. And get this thing reset here. There we go. We can come in here and we can actually get the contour of the fender. And then we can come down here to some of the more crazier stuff, and you can see that it's, well, can't really see that all that well. Let me try that again. But basically just start building the contour and transferring it to your template. Get the template cut out first, line it up, make sure that it's going to fit. You want that template to fit perfectly in that groove and contour to it. And then what you want to do is, there's probably a project you did in high school in an art class, tessellate, I think is what it is. But you're going to tessellate that image on this contour here to the back side of it, 2 inches away from it. Well, at least I'm doing a 2-inch, whatever your measurement is, from here to where you want that flare to stop, and how far you want to push this fender lip out. We want to tessellate that image, and I'll take another video and show you that tessellate. I'll probably already have this fender cut by that point, but that's all you're going to do. And then when you get to the underside of this, you don't just want to cut it straight off. You want to leave yourself some of the structure here, because right here, if I can get this camera to focus in here, there's actually a flange that comes in that allows the bumper to bolt to it. And you want to leave some of that flange, so when this fender moves out 2 inches, you can put a triangle piece in here that obviously faces that way. I'll put a triangle piece in here that can rejoin this back to where the bumper mounts. This is only going to be for the fender itself. Hopefully I'll be making another video when I get the finished pieces that run down the front bumper and down the back. I'm still kind of trying to decide whether or not I want to do a body kit on this. With as crazy as this one's going to be, I'd like to, but eventually this will be a turbo Focus. This is the older ZX engine. These things are good for, I think, up to like 400, 500 horsepower on the stock bottom end. They will hold up to a lot. which is why I'm doing this build, $400 car. You can actually still find these ZX3s for as much as $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 that are in a lot better condition, but for a cheap beater project, cut it up, learn some body work, and have a good time as well, will work great for me for that reason and that purpose. So, oh yeah, let me show you these tires here real quick. You can see where I had these mounted up front and they were rubbing. Not too bad. I got off of it real quick and transferred these to the back. They probably would have worked just fine at the stock ride height, but this one, let's see where those springs, right there. This one's got the Manzo $89 springs, 2-inch drop. I got these off eBay, I think, but fairly inexpensive. I'm not into this car very much at all. I think I'm into it about $1,300 now with replacing the door, a couple other miscellaneous odds and ends. And then starting to actually turn this thing into a cool project. So nothing too crazy yet. Cold air intake, that's, well, technically still a warm air intake. I either need to get a some type of a heat shield around that to keep the heat of the motor, especially the cat, away from the intake, or I need to route it down and deeper in. But with this being a project turbo car, this is all going to get disappeared and redone anyway, so that will not matter. For now, this is just kind of temporary. You'll notice the battery did used to sit right here. I pulled that whole tray out. He did get relocated back into the trunk. Overall, just been a fun car to kind of play around with. Still working through her. Still working on that one. There's the work Suburban. That guy's having fun. And that is another project you guys will be seeing in later videos. That one needs a transmission. It's an 05 V6 Mustang. Not incredible on power, but fun little car to romp around in, but that transmission is absolutely cooked. So we'll be getting a new one of those here next couple of months, maybe even this winter. Not sure. He's just kind of sitting there for now. Cheap little $2,800 car on that one. We're into this one, $1,300, paid $400 for it. It ran and drove. I actually threw a jump pack on it, fired the thing up, and drove it 30 miles home without a single issue, and it had been sitting for 2 years. So watch for part 2. Try and get you guys updated on that. Again, very simple, very inexpensive. The more you grind, the more meticulous you are, the cleaner your lines are going to end up. And this is going to be one of your most critical lines here, where the inner side here, I'll show you on the inside. If I can get this camera up here and in here to focus. Right here's that inner fender, and it's actually lipped over. It's not flush. I actually lipped it over and then welded it from the inside. Now, if you do that, you're going to end up with a lot cleaner, a lot less grinding, so long as you're not burning through your metal. One big thing I do want to let you guys know is when you're welding stuff like this, I believe this was 20 gauge or 18 gauge, somewhere in there. When you are welding this stuff, you need to be, if you're using MIG like I am, MIG welding, which is wire gas with gas, you want your weld settings to be all the way to the lowest on your voltage, and the higher you can ramp up your wire speed, the easier it's going to weld, and it's going to work a lot better. For me, I found on this particular welder, this is a Hobart Handler 140. I've had this for quite a few years now, but 35 to 45, anywhere in that range on wire speed, and voltage as low as you can possibly get it. You don't want to be dumping a lot of heat, especially on this thin sheet metal. So you'll see here I've got some 20 gauge that I actually just picked up today that will help with this project. You can, however, if you really want to be cheap, you can pull parts off of more modern vehicles. You can see this is actually, you can see there's my contour, but this is the old door that we pulled off. It's all caved in here, and I know you can't really see it here in the light, but she's all caved in. But I was able to cut a piece out of that door and use that to make my fender flare. But overall, have a good one, you guys. Watch for part 2, where we'll actually show you, once we got it cut out, how we're going to match everything up, mock it up, and then start tack welding it together. Again, the cleaner you can get your pattern, the cleaner your cutout is going to be. The cleaner your cutout is and your prep work, the cleaner your lines are going to work. This is if you can see this right there, you'll notice that I had a little bit of a boo-boo there and ended up bending that fender in. I may body fill that. I don't like how close that is to the edge for putting body filler on, or I may just slap a couple of tack beads over the top of it, try to bring that back out. But again, I'm not a body man. I'm a mechanic. Have a good one, you guys.